Hi, I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Teleios. Welcome back to our verse-by-verse study on the book of Mark. We're in the exciting and informative Olivet Discourse given by Christ to his disciples at the end of his ministry, just before his terribly unjust crucifixion, but his glorious resurrection. The Olivet Discourse is one of the three major discourses by Christ, that the Sermon on the Mount and the Upper Room Discourse. So he gave plenty of other speeches and communications, and which of course were so instructive to us. This has to do with the Great Tribulation. It's also in Matthew chapter 24 and 25 and Luke chapter 21. I may have said 23 last video, 21. The Great Tribulation, we know by putting scripture together, begins after the rapture, at the end of the church age, as the rapture of Christ gathers his people together with him to take them out of the way of the tribulation, because it's a time of God's wrath, and God's people on the earth before the tribulation do not know God's wrath. Tribulation is a 7-year period before the coming of Christ, of God's wrath and punishment on the earth before his second coming. The last video we covered the first half of the tribulation, and the Olivet Discourses, I think, really from a Jewish perspective, and the book of Revelation covering the same period between chapters 6 really and chapter 18 is more from a worldwide perspective. And the first half of the tribulation will correspond to the seal judgments in chapters 6 and 7, beginning of 8 of Revelation, perhaps the trumpet judgments up until in chapters 8 and 9. The second half of the tribulation we'll discuss now, beginning with verse 14. And when you shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel, the book of Daniel, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand, and let him be in Judea flee to the mountains. So Daniel prophesied the abomination of desolation. It is typed by Antiochus Epiphanes of Greece, that committed this act in 166 BC, which caused the great Maccabean revolt that is celebrated by uh, uh, the feast in December of lights by the Jews. And what happens is the Antichrist, at the midpoint of the tribulation, will go into the temple and stop the sacrifice, maybe tear down the temple, maybe put an idol in the temple, or desecrate it with pigs, which are not allowed by the law, as they're unclean. We don't know, but terrible act in basically ending the Jewish rites in the temple. Now, currently there is no temple in Jerusalem, but there will be during the tribulation. At that time, when the Jews see it in Judea, this is the area around Jerusalem, they're to flee. So that act is an act of faith. This is an instruction to the saints in the tribulation, given by Christ, of what to do. They're to get out, and quickly. As it's described, if you're on the housetop, don't go down to the house and take anything out of the house. Get out. Woe to those who are with child in a suckling stage of life, very young. It'll be even more burdensome than with other people. And except the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, which he had chosen, he shortened the days. Otherwise, he made it less than the 3.5 years until Christ's coming. So some people, a remnant, again, will be preserved. If any man shall say to you, lo, here is the Christ, believe it or not. And false Christ will rise and actually have power, like the Son of Man, the Antichrist and his prophet, the beast. will have power. Again, I think Satan at this point will be trying to stop Christ and his return, much like he tried to stop his first coming, as we read in Revelation 12 and all the demonic activity we saw earlier in this book. He goes, "Behold, I have foretold you these things." Now, people should know that that's not the Christ who are doing these signs, or people calling him Christ, because Christ is going to come in a very particular way where he will be recognized. And we'll see that next time. So they are not to follow him. So what have we seen here? We've seen the second half of the 7-year tribulation described in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27, and described even in much more detail in the book of Revelation, chapter 6 to 18. And it kicks off or starts with the abomination of desolation by the Antichrist desolating the temple of God in Jerusalem. And when the Jews see this, they are to flee to the mountains for safety and not stay there, to drop what they're doing and just go. He's warning them of false witnesses saying that they're Christ, false prophets. Even that they demonstrate powers or say they're Christ, they're not to believe him. So it'll be a terrible time. It'll be worse than the first 3.5 years. And they're to flee to the mountains for their own safety until Christ comes again. Those who remain alive and who believe will enter into Christ's 1,000-year reign, starting in chapter 19 of Revelation. Okay, we'll talk about the glorious return of Christ next time. That's better. And our return of our glorious Christ and our great hope in eternity, God keeps his promises. I'll look forward to seeing you then.